taking notes from nobody.
Your superstars have off games.
Follow us on social media at Celtics Talk Weekly.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Celtics Postgame Live. I am your host, Robbie Tam. I'm with my co-host, Seamus, aka Celtics Every Day. Guys, the Boston Celtics beat the Brooklyn Nets in blowout fashion as they win 126-91. The Celtics extend their winning streak to 6 games. Brooklyn falls to 9 straight losses. They have 15 losses since the new year, which is the most in any team in the league. Obviously, Brooklyn without Harden, Durant, and Kyrie, their big three. That definitely plays a big-time factor into tonight's loss. However, Seamus, the Celtics are kind of rolling right now. Celtics, didn't really let the Nets hang around. They started out the game 28-2. Nets kind of came knocking, put the lead back down to 12, but Celtics, after a quick Udoka timeout, shut the door on their toes quickly. And, it definitely came out, and the Celtics made a statement win here as they take over the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference.
See this red shirt right here?
Yeah.
See, you know why it's red? Before the game, it was white. But you know why it's red now? Because there's Nets blood all over it. Nets blood. Brooklyn Nets blood all over it. And that's exactly what we saw tonight in Brooklyn is a bloodbath. The Nets had no chance. 28-2 run surrendered to the Celtics to start the game. And from there on out, it wasn't even a game. It really wasn't. There were a couple of Nets runs in there, but nothing significant or nearly significant enough to actually bring them back within reach of the game. And the Celtics, we expected this coming into this game now that KD, Kyrie, Harden, they were all ruled out tonight. Celtics, they're fully healthy. They should have came in, dominated. They did exactly that, came away with their 6th straight win, handed the Nets their 9th straight loss, and hopped the Nets in the standings. This is a huge night for the Celtics, and maybe, possibly, hopefully, this is the actual turning point of the season in which we go, that is when we hop the Nets. The Nets hopefully never retook our spot, and that's when we took off. Maybe.
Yeah,
hopefully, possibly.
Celtics advanced to 31-25, 6 games over 500. They play the Denver Nuggets back at home on Friday night at 7:30. Celtics red hot, like you said, winning 8 of their last 9. Denver currently playing a game right now that could play a factor. They're playing New York. They're up by 20 right now, so they will enter Friday night's game 30-24. Kind of right around the same as Boston. Obviously, Denver going through some injuries. No Michael Porter Jr., no Jamal Murray. However, they have the MVP, Nikola Jokic, so that's going to be a big game. And if you ask me, Seamus, I think that game is the telltale sign whether or not the Boston Celtics are for real about making a run here in the second half of the season. I think they've gotten some, blowout commanding fashion wins, which you love to see. However, I do think that, the teams we've been playing are kind of on the lower end of the NBA skill level. Obviously, I think you asked me, this Brooklyn Nets lineup that we saw out there tonight was probably the worst lineup in the NBA. I mean, they have not been playing good basketball. Insult to injury, their 3 stars are out. However, a blowout win's a blowout win. So, what's your expectation as kind of the Celtics finally have their first, big win of the year or game of the year?
Well, my expectation for this team, I guess I have no expectations from here on out moving forward because I don't know what to expect out of this team on a nightly basis because we thought we knew this team at one point earlier in the season, earlier in December, throughout December. We knew that, okay, they're going to, be this middling basketball team that can never quite pull out games. They're going to be in a ton of games, but they're never going to be able to quite pull out games. They're going to lose to good teams, beat bad teams, and that has been sort of the trend up to this point, but we're starting to turn a little bit of a corner here, and some of these wins, they can't be completely overlooked because the Celtics did, at the end of the day, have to go out and actually execute in these games, in which they have, but we haven't really played a good team in a while, and this Nuggets game is going to be, I don't want to say it's a gauge on where we're truly at, especially a game against the Nuggets where they're coming from the West Coast to the East Coast. I believe we're going or we're playing in the Garden, correct?
Yeah, at home back at TD.
Yeah, that's a really hard game to gauge where we are. It's usually, another East opponent like the Bulls, Bucks, Sixers. It's opponents like that really get me excited that, hey, maybe we can go out and make a run. Can we beat these teams? An opponent, a West opponent, it's always up in the air because, it's coast to coast. But it's definitely a real opponent. The Nuggets we're facing on whatever day we're facing them. I have no idea what day of the week it is. I just know we have like 48 hours until the trade deadline. That's all I know. But this Nuggets team is going to be a real team that we face. And I wouldn't say it's a gauge on where this team is at, but I would say that it's a good game to see where, where we actually stand, because I guess I am saying it is a good gauge, but it's not necessarily a gauge on whether or not we're going to be good moving forward. It's a gauge to see where we're really at with some of these other teams, because as of late, I think we've been beating a lot of bad teams, and that is really evident up to this point. But we're on a roll. We've been playing tremendously defensively, and if we can just bring that and build on it moving forward, maybe the trade deadline we go out and add another offensive piece. That is still a possibility that is out there, or upgrade the roster in some fashion. If we do that, this team could definitely make some noise come April, May, and I'm not going to go as far to say June, but that would be cool too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I do. I personally think this home game against the Nuggets and even Atlanta, those are two games, in my opinion, you kind of have to win. You're going back home. You're streaking. You just went out on a little road trip. You took care of business. You went undefeated. You haven't lost a game in February. You're looking really good. You're playing the best defense in basketball. Um, it's a game against, like you said, Denver, a team you only see twice a year. A very competent basketball team, a good basketball team, reigning MVP on the court alongside, the guys. And then Sunday afternoon, you got a team that's also kind of red hot right now in the Eastern Conference, someone that could potentially, depending on how each team kind of continues to play, be your running mate in the race, and you might bump into them in the standings when you kind of want that tiebreaker. Atlanta's kind of had our number on the road here. You kind of finally get a shot at them back at our place. So I think even this, you could say that Philly game. I think Boston, these next three games, Denver, Atlanta, Philly, got to come out there, win at least two of them, and extend this winning streak. And the reason why I say that is not just to climb the standings, really is the main reason, but because, the Celtics have so much ground to make up, right? It really is this win streak. They have to push it and extend it to as far as they can entering the All-Star break. And I think a game against the Nuggets, a very winnable game at home. Same with Atlanta. I don't think you can afford a loss. That I think, especially, I don't know if right now, I think the Celtics team's playing with all the confidence in the world, but there might be that doubt in the back of their mind. Look at these teams we've been playing. I don't think it is. We've been blowing them every game we've played. We've been blowing out the other team by 20 plus, which I think is a good sign. However good they are, you're stomping on their necks pretty early. But I don't know what you think about that, but to me, I think they're two, air quotes, must-win games.
Yeah. Did you see that stat at the end of the game where TNT had that stat where the Celtics, I believe they have 8 wire-to-wire wins this season, which is tied for the second most, only behind the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA. So we're second in the NBA in wire-to-wire wins, which feels crazy because of all the leads that we've blown. But some of these games, we're just dominating opponents, and you don't really expect to see that against the best teams. We don't expect to go out there and dominate the best teams, but you want to be competitive throughout the full 48 minutes, and that is part of the problem I feel with the Celtics team at times. Is even when we are good against good teams, it's not consistently for the full 48. And like we see time and time again, it's down the stretch is when the team struggles. So moving forward, when we face Atlanta, we face Philly, when we face Denver, I'm looking for not only can we pull out 2 of these 3 games, and that's really the goal here is 2 of the 3, because you expect 3 good opponents, 2 of the 3, hopefully, if not all 3. I'm looking for full 48 minutes of consistency. Even if we do lose one or two of these games, I want to see us lose in a fashion that doesn't look like, oh, we scored 5 points in 7 minutes in the fourth quarter, or oh, we let up a 23-10 run in the fourth quarter to close out the game. We have to lose in a fashion that is, it was back and forth the whole game. We were there right at the end, and it just came down to say the last shot or something of that nature. And I, I'm looking for the Celtics to really play consistent against a good opponent. I don't think we've seen that in a while, quite frankly. I think it's been probably the last time I would say is against Philly to start December, and that feels like ages ago. That was the last time the Celtics really played wire to wire consistently against a good opponent. And we have another opportunity to show it again moving forward these next 3 games. These 3 games are going to be huge because right now the team is on a roll. I'm sure they're feeling good about themselves. We're entering the trade deadline. And now if you go out and drop all 3 of these games, 3-game losing streak, we're not competitive. We're losing the rope here. That's going to be terrible moving forward for not only the team, but just the overall implications of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum moving forward. If we can't build something here this season, it's going to be a rocky road moving forward. And I don't want to put too much stock and pressure on these next 3 games, but they are against really good opponents. And that is the question. Can we beat really good opponents?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, Ian is joining us in on Postgame Live. Real quick before I throw it over to you, Ian. It's obviously, like you said, Seamus, last year, Celtics kind of in April in the same situation. They were teetering right around 500 all year. They were a game back. Celtics, I believe, went on a 6-game win streak, put up to go up to 500, and then they finished the year 5-10. Obviously, this year, Celtics much, I think, better basketball team. Obviously, we can talk about the trade deadline a little bit later on in the show, but that's something to think about as well. Ian, though, I ask you this every time, man. Thoughts, opinions, positives, negatives on tonight's Celtics blowout win in Brooklyn.
Oh man, I don't really care who the Brooklyn Nets have on their team. They can try out a G League roster for all I care. I'm just happy we beat the Nets. Like, we destroyed the Nets. Like, I mean, it got so bad that TNT didn't even want to broadcast it anymore. That's how bad it was. Like, they spanked the Nets all night long, and it was good to see. Man, there's really not much else to say outside of that, really. Everyone played pretty solid. Tatum looked comfortable when they were double teaming him, which was something that, I was kind of concerned with personally about if they double team Tatum, is he going to make the right pass? Are they going to be able to do anything? And they were able to do something. So it was a pretty good game tonight. I had a fun time watching it, even though TNT cut out pretty much the entire third quarter. So
yeah, it was a great win, and something we didn't really credit these guys last game, and I think they're really smart in Robert Williams. They're kind of to credit for the recent success in a sense where I think they're bringing this energy and this defensive presence that, I mean, when you have a front court guy like a backcourt guy like Smart and a front court guy like Robert Williams at all times on the defensive end, that's really tough for teams to get around. And they got some great supporting cast members on defense too. Richardson, Grant, Horford's played some solid D, and Brown and Tatum do their thing from time to time on defense as well. So I really do think the defense has been solid, and I think Smart and Robert Williams are to really credit. I mean, everyone's done a phenomenal job, but those two guys in particular really being the backbone of the Celtics defense. But something I want to talk about, guys, is the deadline. I mean, there's some moves that were made today around the league that sparked some social media talks. Obviously Sabonis getting moved to Sacramento and whatnot, and is Boston. They turned down an offer from LA for Horton Tucker and I believe a pick for Richardson. Celtics didn't want that. There were some talks about a Dennis Schroeder for DiVincenzo swap, and then Grant Williams' names was brought up, and the Celtics were not having any of that. They turned that down, thankfully. And then still apparently are in talks with the Timberwolves for Malik Beasley. Celtics think Malik's a great guy, 25 to pair next to Brown and Tatum. Where do you guys see, especially with how well the Celtics have been playing up until the deadline, where do you see and what do you see Brad Stevens doing? Does he hold? Is he a buyer officially, or what does he do?
honestly, with the way the East is kind of collapsing in on itself at the moment, I feel like this is the perfect time to make a move. He doesn't have to go out there and get a superstar. He didn't have to get Buddy Hield. He didn't have to get Sabonis. Would it have been nice? Yeah, it would have. But if he can just make a move to get a couple more shooters, like he doesn't even need to. I don't really care what he does, honestly. As long as he can, if he has to trade not Williams, Neesmith, Langford, Pritchard, Freedom. I don't care anyone like on the back end of our bench. If he has to trade one of those guys to get a shooter like DiVincenzo or Malik Beasley, I'm all for it. We need it shooting. I mean, they kind of talked about it on the broadcast where it was like the team is kind of built for the playoffs, but at the same time, their starters are basically their main core. They need some more shooting. That's basically it. We've been saying it for the last like 2 weeks or so. But if they're gonna make a legitimate move at the deadline, it's got to be shooting. Malik Beasley, I'm fine with Dante DiVincenzo. I like Dante DiVincenzo. So if we can just get a shooter, maybe 2 shooters, that would probably be the most ideal thing for Brad Stevens this trade deadline. Which I'm not saying it's easy or anything, but at the same time, that's kind of the biggest need the Celtics have if they want to be a legit contender this year.
Yeah, and speaking of shooting, before I get into the trade deadline stuff here for a second, tonight the Celtics and the Nets combined for 76 three-pointers. Marcus Smart and Javon Carter took 26 of those.
Yeah.
Hey, they were lighting it up though.
Shooting.
They were lighting it up though. Javon Carter.
Yeah.
I have a funny story about Javon Carter. The first time I ever saw him play, I don't know why, but I was randomly watching a West Virginia game, and I just remember seeing him, and like he literally just like he was dogging everyone in college. So I always had a soft spot for Javon Carter just because of how hard he plays.
Yeah, I love Javon Carter. But anyway, back to the Celtics trade deadline. Acquisitions, non-acquisitions, possible acquisitions. The Celtics, the names are still out there. Harrison Barnes could be dealt. There's offers on the table for him. Maybe not from the Celtics. He's a guy that I'd like to see the Celtics entertain. Possibly they did last year. I don't think they're going to be in on his sweepstakes this year. Buddy Hield is still a guy the Celtics could look at because the Pacers could possibly flip him elsewhere. I don't really see him slotting into that Indiana roster at all the rest of the year. So that's why I feel like he could be dealt in the next couple of days or next 48 hours, I should say. Aside from that, Jeremy Grant, doesn't really sound like there's anything going on within the Jeremy Grant sweepstakes. But then again, that could be a lot of smoke. Who knows who Detroit's actually talking to. The Malik Beasley thing is really interesting to me. I think Malik Beasley would be a clear upgrade over Josh Richardson. I know people love Josh Richardson in Boston, how hard he plays on defense, but for what the Celtics' needs are right now and what they're already good at defensively with Brown and Tatum at the wing positions, I think sacrificing Josh Richardson's defense for Malik Beasley's offense makes a lot of sense for the Celtics moving forward. And cutting bait with a guy like Romeo Langford or Aaron Neesmith, that would be more of an enticer for that deal for Minnesota. And also, like I said on my IG Live, are these guys going to be successful with the Celtics, or do they need another situation? Are they really going to be successful with Brown, Tatum, and Udoka as the head coach while they are trying to win a championship? I don't know if, obviously not Tatum, Langford and Neesmith will ever be successful in Boston because simply the minutes might not be there.
Yeah.
And aside from that, Josh Richardson could be in that deal as well. Another destination that was talked about surrounding him was Los Angeles. I thought about that as a destination for him last week. I was kind of mulling around that idea, like, hey, maybe the Lakers here could go after Richardson, and I don't really know what they would give up, but they've been really adamant on giving up THT, a future first-round pick, likely 2027, possibly Kendrick Nunn. I don't know if they'd shop around Malik Monk. He's their only shooter out there, which is what makes me think, or the Lakers' only real shooter on the roster, which makes me think they're probably going to keep him. But I wouldn't take Taylor Horton-Tucker and Kendrick Nunn for Josh Richardson. I think Josh Richardson has played himself into a role in which he's an actual valuable trade asset now, whereas Taylor Horton-Tucker's value has only diminished, and he's on a terrible, terrible contract right now. 3 years, $30 million, $10 million a year for him, who we don't even know is a good player yet. And so you look at that deal, I don't think a deal is really there with Los Angeles. Milwaukee, Schroeder, that's a possible swap there, although we've heard talks are dormant. Only takes one phone call to get something done in the NBA, 2 phone calls to get something done in the NBA. I love the idea of getting Dante DiVincenzo for Dennis Schroeder. For us, that would be a massive, massive upgrade, and just we would slot in a player who actually fits onto the roster and fits into the rotation and what we want to do, rather than Dennis Schroeder here, who's kind of just whimsically moving around, not really doing anything for us right now. And we've seen his minutes just decline very slowly over this past January, especially after Marcus Smart was inserted back into the lineup. So if you could replace Dennis Schroeder with Dante DiVincenzo, that would be just incredible. But I'm speculating that Milwaukee probably wants to give us either Rodney Hood or George Hill. I've thought about Pat Connaughton, but his deal is just so good for them moving forward. And into next season, he's a starter, fringe rotation player for them, or sixth-man player for them. So I think they're going to keep him. I don't think we deal Grant Williams in a trade like that. I just think Grant's been really, really good for us this year. And, yes, you have to give up something to get something, but I don't think we're in a huge rush to go out there and get Dante DiVincenzo that we need to give up Grant Williams. Are one of our only good young pieces at the moment and aren't one of our only developed pieces. So I don't really see that happening. Although a deal with Milwaukee, who knows? It could happen, could not. Philadelphia, also mentioned as a destination for Schroeder. Is that for leverage, or are they actually interested in this at this point? I think it could be either or. They need a point guard right now. They need a playmaking point guard. We all know Dennis Schroeder isn't exactly that point guard, but they need a point guard regardless on the roster. Somebody who can come off the bench, get them buckets. So Philadelphia could be in on those sweepstakes. Chicago, Troy Brown in the second. We discussed this a lot the other day. What does that really do for the Celtics moving forward? But a lot of stuff going on for the Celtics. A lot of possibilities still on the table. Josh Richardson could be moved, could not be moved. The Celtics could just say, oh, we like what we have here with Josh Richardson. We're just going to keep him, along with all these other young guys. We're just going to continue to try and develop and just stand pat to a certain extent outside of an inevitable Dennis Schroeder move. But certainly a lot to play out in the next 48 hours regarding the Boston Celtics and the roster.
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 directions that Brad's going to go, and I think there's 2 things he's got to think about. If an offer for Schroeder because he's made it clear that he's looking to, if not upgrade the fit from Schroeder, then at least stay the same, right? He doesn't want to downgrade. And so I think if the offer isn't right on the table for Schroeder, I think he holds. I think he finds a different way to go about using the luxury cap or tax, especially with the way the Celtics have been playing. I think there's more of an incentive not to pull the trigger on just anything for Schroeder. I'm not saying we're going to sign him back or not, but with the way we've been playing, it looks promising. And, obviously he's good enough to get the job done. There's times where he kind of looks lost in the offense and he kind of plays at a slower pace when this team has shown that they've been so successful, kind of going, at a faster pace. Steven said, or a report came out, he feels very comfortable with Richardson being that backup ball handler behind Smart. We all know Smart has been so phenomenal at that point guard spot ever since he got reinserted back to the lineup. Kind of just out of nowhere, kind of figured it out on what he needed to do. So credit to Smart where credit is due. For me, if we could find a way to land DiVincenzo without giving up Grant, obviously his name was put out there. Grant's kind of the perfect fit around Giannis. It makes sense why they tried to, throw that in there. If we could maybe throw in Langford in a second round pick, maybe that's too much for DiVincenzo. Personally speaking, DiVincenzo, I believe he's got another year left on his contract. He is a restricted free agent, so we could match any offer that's on the table if we do trade for him. I love the fit. I think he's right around 6'6", 6'5", I want to say. He can be a ball handler if he needs to be in the moment, but he spaces well, shoots well. Obviously, coming back from injury, so he's kind of been shaky to start the year. I do think that these next 2 days are really important, though. And one thing I don't think Brad's going to do that I hope he doesn't do is if the offer isn't right for Dennis Schroeder, hold, right? Just play out the year. It's $6 million or $5.9 million, $5.6 million between Troy Brown and the second round pick or keeping Schroeder for the rest of the year. I'm picking Schroeder for the rest of the year. And you can live with the fact that their offer wasn't there. His value really isn't very high right now, especially with his decreasing minutes and kind of how his inconsistent play has been. So if it's not there, ride it out. I do think there's ways to find another shooter, call up some teams that are sellers. I think Neesmith and Langford, at least one of the two have to be dealt, in my opinion, at the deadline. You need a guy that can shoot the basketball consistently, and they have not proven they can do that. But yeah, that's what I think. I think that if you can get a shooter on this basketball team, they could maybe do something. I mean, they look really good right now, and obviously we need some Toronto Raptors losses here. And they play the Thunder, and I want to say the Magic the next two games too. So the Celtics, they got to take care of business at home. They got to go 2-0 at home.
Yeah. And to go back with your Schroeder thing, I think the worst thing Brad could do is just sell Schroeder for nothing.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think he knows that.
Yeah, like he's smart. Now, no offense to Danny Ainge, but if it was Danny Ainge, he would have already sold. He would have taken the Chicago deal by now.
Yeah, I agree.
And we would have Troy Brown in a second for Schroeder at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really important for the Celtics to continue the momentum that they're on. And I mean, Denver, it's going to be rough because there's only so much you can do with Jokic. I mean, there's not really too much to worry about outside of Jokic. Aaron Gordon is pretty good, but outside of that, you kind of just need to focus on maybe scoring the basketball. And then the Hawks game, the Hawks always play the Celtics rough. And I mean, especially at home, it's going to be really important for the Celtics to win these next two games because, I mean, you never know what can happen. Maybe the Thunder and the Magic beat the Raptors and somehow crazy way. I don't know how, but it's the Celtics need to do their part. For as much as they need to look at the Raptors, at least for now, they need to focus on just playing the best that they can play at this moment in time, because that's going to be the most important thing when it comes to potentially making a run later in the year.
Yeah, I mean, Boston is 6 of their last 6, 8 of their last 9, 10 of their last 13, and 13 of their last 17. Regardless of who we're playing, mind you, because that awful December schedule where we played a playoff team literally every single night. That's not a over exaggeration. It's actually a fact. If you go back and you look at the, I believe we played the Knicks once or twice, but other than the Knicks, we literally played a playoff team every night in December. So where Celtics are actually just finally getting the schedule that kind of everyone else has had, and they're definitely pouncing on that opportunity. In my opinion, you ask me, the Celtics have gone from sellers in December to holders in January to now buyers in February. You need to buy. If I'm Brad Stevens, something's out there in the market right now that you can get for Neesmith in a second round pick or Langford in a second round pick. You got some trade exceptions you can use to match salary. Go out there, get some shooting. I don't really think you need a playmaker right now. Smart's doing his thing, and the way Tatum's been passing the basketball too, there's really no need for a playmaker, I think, at this time. That can change, but if it changes, then so be it. But I think right now, get a shooter, and they got to be buyers. We've gone from, like I said, we month and a half ago we were sellers for sure. I thought everyone was gone. I thought Schroeder was gone, Horford was gone. And recently, I think the Celtics and Brad 100% have to jump on this market right now, because I think you've seen some guys go for very, very cheap.
Yeah. One thing before you go, Seamus, should we credit Ime Udoka a little bit for the turnaround? Now, he did say he wanted them to pass the ball a lot more, and TNT showed the graphic. Over the course of the season, they were like 26th, 25th, and 24th over the last 3 months. And then going into February, they're 7th in the entire NBA in assists per game, which is kind of insane. So, I mean, I think we do have to give Ime Udoka his flowers. He hasn't had the greatest start, but, I mean, you can only do so much with what the team was back in December. So, I mean, we got to give Ime a little bit of credit before people figure it out. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that Ime deserves a ton of credit for this last run and even the turnaround this season from last season. Because last season, the way it ended, the way the season ended with that specific team, it was just, there was no optimism there at all. There was nothing to really build off of there. It had to be torn down a little bit, traded Kimba, traded Tristan Thompson to actually come out and build something this season. And you look at the defensive end of the floor, and that is really the last couple of years, the last half decade, well, really the Brad Stevens era. So since KG, Paul Pierce, all of them were dealt away. Since that era, the Celtics have hung their hat solely on defense. They've never been this offensive juggernaut of a team. Under Brad Stevens, they've always been a hard-nosed, hard-hat defensive team. And last season, that identity went away entirely. 1920 was still there. We were top 5 in defensive rating. And then last year, it just all fell off a cliff. Yet you look at it this year, coming into this year, that's completely changed. We're now on the other spectrum. We're near the top yet again, and that is huge credit to Ime Udoka, who came in and emphasized the defensive end of the floor first. And hopefully later on in time, offensively, the Celtics will develop further into a more efficient offensive team. I don't want to say we're going to be a team like Phoenix because they have the point god and Chris Paul and just the perfect situation there. But you see a team like Phoenix and how they're efficiently run. The Celtics aren't up to par with that on offense yet. No. But defensively, they could be possibly the best defensive team in the league right now. And that's huge credit to Ime. Huge credit to the players who are actually buying in, unlike last year. Yeah. I know a lot of people said that was Brad's fault. I don't think that was Brad's fault. I think it was just situationally what was going on last year and just the inconsistency of the team. But this year, players are buying in, and they've come out and achieved results here at the end of January, beginning of February, heading towards All-Star break that they wanted to all season long. And finally, with 30 games left, still a lot of schedule left in front of us, the team seems like it's starting to turn around. And that is really all credit to the head coach and the players going out there and executing, and whether or not the opponent is good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one Friday night, if you ask me. Celtics red hot. They're going back home. If in my opinion, probably to a sold-out TD Garden. I think the Celtics are they've gone from zero interest to, I would go to some games back in November and, you see some open seats and yeah, I think a Friday night game against the Nuggets for a red hot Celtics team, the Garden's going to be rocking. The Celtics cannot disappoint. Robert Williams, Al Horford have their hands full with the MVP in town, but I think it's a golden opportunity. These next 2 home games, Celtics, they've now entered, the standard is now the expectation has gone up a little bit. You remember, Seamus, around a month ago, we had no expectation for this team because they couldn't play consistently. When you win 13 of your last 17, that's consistent basketball. So, the standard is set. The expectation is there. The Celtics finally get a real matchup to go in on Friday night. We will have you covered post-game again. Back here. Guys, before we close out the show, I always do this. I'm asking your thoughts, opinions, trade deadline coming up. We won't have a show. Maybe we'll do a little trade deadline special. Who knows? But, we don't have a show until the deadline ends. So, final thoughts.
I'm interested to see what happens. The trades that happened today were kind of absolutely insane. Yeah. I didn't expect CJ McCollum to get traded to the Pelicans. Of all teams, the Pelicans...
They got a solid roster out there now.
Yeah,
they've been playing very well as of late.
Yeah. Ingram, CJ McCollum. I feel like an Ingram and CJ McCollum pairing would work a lot better than a Dame and CJ McCollum pairing, just because they complement each other a little more, I feel like. So who knows? Maybe the Pelicans can make a play-in spot and surprise some people. Maybe they make a playoff spot. And, the Sacramento Kings, I think, made the worst trade of the trade deadline. I don't really think another team can make a bad trade. They traded Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis. And, Tyrese Halliburton's going to be a star. And he's a really good player. And, the Pacers kind of fleeced Sabonis out of that deal. I might be wrong, but Halliburton, I'm really high on Halliburton. So He's going to be crazy on the Pacers now that he basically has the team to himself now.
Yeah, today was just more extension of craziness in the NBA. We can never avoid it, ever. And today's deals, just quick rundown of all these deals. Quick winners and losers. Clear loser to me, the Sacramento Kings. Another clear loser, the Portland Trailblazers. The Blazers, they've already traded away 4 of their assets that we've expected them that they were going to go out and sell for players not up to the caliber of those assets and picks that what 3 second-round picks and a first-round pick for McCollum, Nance, Powell, and Covington. Really, that's all you could get in terms of draft picks and compensation for them. I felt like they could have gotten way more out of all those players if they actually called around the league, which it feels like they didn't, because a lot of teams, it seems like they would have been throwing things if they heard Powell and Covington got traded for Bledsoe, Justice Winslow in a second, and Keon Johnson. That's just ridiculous. So the Blazers, I know they're trying to create cap space for Damian Lillard moving forward, but you got to get something for those assets, more picks preferably for those assets than they did. They just came out on the short end of the stick, I feel like. And the Pelicans, they're winners today. They received CJ McCollum. That puts butts in seats. That makes their team better moving forward. They're already starting to turn a corner without Zion. If you can bring him back later this season, that builds something there moving into next season. And all of a sudden that situation becomes a little bit more lighter, than it was a couple of months ago when they started the season out 1-12. Another winner of this trade deadline, Pacers. Come on. They wanted a Nikola Vucevic type of package for Domantas Sabonis, and they ended up getting Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, you can't. And Buddy Hield, who I said earlier in the show, they could still flip at the.
He's also young. Buddy's a young. He's only 26.
I think he's like 27 or 28.
Yeah, but he's not old.
But he's a player that could slot in for them, but I think was most likely to be dealt for more assets. So you get him in that deal along with Tyrese Halliburton, complete fleecing of the Kings, who, yes, Domantas Sabonis is an all-star. He's a great player, and he's someone who fits well with a lot of NBA teams. But in Sacramento, that's the one place he doesn't really fit. If they still have Rashawn Holmes past the trade deadline and they're building around him and Fox, where does that get you? Specifically in the Western Conference. Just doesn't make any sense. And the Sacramento Kings, they just continue this long timeline of just questionable decision-making, questionable just trades, draft picks, whatever you want to call it, whatever the story is with them at the end of the day. Continuous extension of their dysfunction. And I feel bad for Kings fans. That's my last thought of the day. I feel bad for Kyle Draper, who shout out the Drapes grind. Shout out him. Shout out Mark Jones out there. And they have a woman on the broadcast. I forgot her name as well. She's tremendous on their broadcast, NBC Sports California. So I feel bad for all of them. And hopefully the Kings can make better decisions. I'm a Sabonis fan. Hopefully he can flourish there in Sacramento. Hopefully him and Fox can coexist and build something there. Who knows in that regard, but I don't feel that ultra confident in it. But so sad, Kings fans. Just that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well,
don't worry, Kings fans. There's plenty of liquor out there.
Celtics just 2 games back from the 5 spot, playing Philly in just right under a week. So big couple games coming up for the C's as we approach the weekend. Celtics catch a big one tonight, beating the Brooklyn Nets 126-91. I'm Rob. That is Seamus. Below me is Ian. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in on Celtics Postgame Live. We will see you Friday night from TD Garden, and go C's.